Hi guys, today is Friday afternoon. It's kind of late in the day, I've just gotten off work, so I think I've only got a few hours of daylight left. So I better get busy. Why don't I start out by just grabbing a first set of moisture readings from the hull. If you're new to my channel and you're wondering why I care about the moisture levels here inside the laminate, you could always go back and check out some of the earlier videos, but just to bring you up to speed really quickly, when I purchased Athena last summer, she had a bit of osmosis and I'm trying to treat that, but before I can proceed to the next step in that treatment, I need the hull to dry out. And to measure those moisture levels, I'm using a non-destructive moisture meter. The first measurement is 40 on the comparative scale. I'll go ahead and grab some measurements from the 24 data points I'm tracking on each side of the hull. And when I've got all of those measurements, we can head up and take a look. That was the last measurement. By the way, the new AC and DC distribution panels for the boat have arrived in the UK, so I'm almost certain they'll arrive here in Denmark sometime next week. Naturally, I am super excited, and I know some of you guys are too, but rest assured, as soon as they arrive, I'll post some photos on Facebook. But let's get back to the panels and rewiring the boat once the panels have arrived. For now, let's head down below and take a look at the moisture readings. Last I checked, which I think is about 3 or 4 weeks ago, the average of all the moisture readings on the starboard side of the hull had dropped to 64.17. Fingers crossed they've continued to drop. Okay, here we go. Can I get a drum roll, please? No? Well, okay then. The average of all the moisture readings on the starboard side of the hull have continued to drop, and it's now down to 63.13. So the good news is that the average of all the moisture readings have continued to drop. There's one slight little twist though, and that's the fact that it's only 4 data points that have actually dropped. The rest have either stayed at the same level they were 3 or 4 weeks ago, and even a few of them have gone up a little bit. I'm still crossing my fingers that I'll be able to move on to the next step in the osmosis treatment in either August or September, because that is what's keeping me from putting Athena back in the water. Now let's move on to something completely different. Although it is a related topic, look at all that water. I think the boat has developed a new leak. I'm 99% sure that this is where that leak is. One of the previous owners of Athena had a stove mounted on this bulkhead, and there was a flue that came up through the deck here, and that hole is still there and it's just sealed up with some gunk. Or to be more accurate in the description, perhaps I should say some gunk in here and then a rather dodgy looking piece of plywood. I'm not concerned about that leak because once I remove the old teak deck, I could just re-core that area of the deck, and that's a foam core, so that'll be really easy to do. But for now, I'll just see if I can get my hands on a tarp and cover up that area of the deck and of course clean up all of that water. It would suck to be living aboard the boat and then find a leak of this magnitude. So in a way, it's good that I haven't moved aboard Athena yet. I've cleaned up most of the water down here, and I've just lifted the part of the cabin sole that goes here. And surprise, surprise, again, there's plenty of standing water in this small compartment here. It boggles the mind that this boat is constructed in such a way that you can have standing water in a compartment like this without any way of draining the water out of there. And also taking into consideration that the boat is leaning quite a lot forward in its cradle right now. All of the water is pooled back here, so the tiny hole that's drilled in the forward part of this compartment makes absolutely no difference. In my mind, the only right thing to do here is to drill a hole so that this compartment can drain. And I've got two options. I can either drill a hole through this, which is structural. That would lead the water to this compartment, which has a limber hole that leads to the bilge, so that would work. The other option is to drill a hole here and here. These aren't structural, so yeah, I think I'm gonna go with drilling a hole in these. But before I start drilling, I better just get this water out of there. Inspired by a fellow Warrior 38 owner that sent me some pictures a few days ago, I thought it'd be cool to clean up the inside of the hull a little bit just to see how she looks. Ah, look at that water drain. That's wonderful. Wow, she looks almost brand new. Well, except for the areas where there's been standing water for years, which has caused the paint to flake off. If you're wondering why I drilled a hole in the middle of this compartment when I said I had to drill a hole here and here in order for this to drain, well, that's just because the last bit of water that was in there when I was cleaning it out gathered up in the middle. Looking at the way the water pooled when I was emptying out that small compartment, I think having the hole in the middle is going to work out even when I put Athena back in the water. But if that's not the case, I can always just drill a few more holes. And one of the cool things about drilling a hole like that is the fact that you get to see a core sample of your boat. Looking at this, you can see that the plywood core is squeaky dry. Now once the hole has had a chance to dry out, I'll go back and seal up the edges with some epoxy. Of course, having a round hole sitting up against the inside of the hull is not really ideal. It would be much better to flatten out the bottom part of the hole. If I end up sawing a hole through the hull with my oscillating tool here, I'll be really annoyed with myself, but let's give this a go. Ta-da! A hole with a flat bottom. That should do an excellent job of draining this compartment. Now that I'm busy cleaning up yucky water, I might as well just clean up the tiny bit of water that actually found its way into the bilge. Oh, this is glamorous work for sure. Welcome back in the portside aft cabin. Last weekend I started ferrying the surface of the bulkhead here behind me. Let's clean that up and see if I need to do any more ferrying. The small patch down here is perfect. And the big patch, there are a couple of low spots, one up here and one down here. There are also a few holes I missed, so it looks like I'll have to mix up some epoxy. Let's see what that bulkhead looks like tomorrow once the thickened epoxy has had a chance to cure. Before calling it quits for today, there's one last thing I want to mention. In response to my last video, I got a few comments asking why on earth I didn't hook up a vacuum to my sander. It might not look like it on camera, but this is a very confined space. And this sander is already pretty bulky. If I had that big hose coming out of it and also a vacuum in here, it would be almost impossible for me to move around. So for me, it's just a little bit easier to make a mess now and then spend a bit of time cleaning it up before I start painting and varnishing. Or well, at least that's my opinion. Your mileage may vary. Good morning, guys. Today is Saturday and I've been looking forward to today all week. And why is that, you might ask? Well, if, and there is a bit of an if, but we'll get back to that. If everything goes according to plan, I should be able to start lining this area with stainless steel today. If we continue down that line of questioning, the next logical question would be, but why is that so exciting? Well, because lining this area with stainless steel is basically the last thing I need to do before I can start cutting teak molding. And getting that teak molding on the galley is sort of the finishing touch. That'll show you what the galley is going to look like once I'm done. But we'll get back to the teak molding in a later video. Let's get back to that stainless steel. This is the stainless steel I've ordered. And the if I mentioned a few seconds ago was because my measurements might have been just a little bit off, but we'll see later today. The first step is going to be to get rid of this old laminate. As you might be able to tell, there's been a slight change of plans, but we'll get back to that as soon as I've removed the last piece of laminate. Ta-da! All of the laminate is gone. By scoring the laminate like I showed you in there, you get a much cleaner break. Although, as you'll see later on, it's not really necessary here. Removing the old laminate wasn't really all that difficult, although it does seem like two different kinds of adhesive were used, because this was on the sides, and as you can see, it's a nice clean break, whereas this piece, which was on the bottom, pulled off the outer veneer of the plywood. The fact that the outer veneer has been removed from this piece of plywood doesn't really matter, it'll all get covered up by stainless steel. I mentioned a small change of plans. I wasn't planning on removing the plywood that was here and also down here, but while I was fiddling around with that laminate, this top piece just fell out. And looking at this, there's a lot of wasted space in there. It wouldn't take me more than 20, maybe 30 minutes to put a small shelf in here and then a hatch up here so that I can gain access to this compartment. It's not going to be the most accessible storage in the world because I'd have to remove whatever is up here in order to gain access. But then on the other hand, this compartment here, I'd say I'd maybe be able to fit 3 weeks worth of food in there. 15 centimeters, 16 centimeters. I'll remove a little bit of material to leave room for the tapping. Because the boat is up on the hard and tilting a little bit forward and a little bit towards starboard, the only thing I can do to get that shelf to sit level is to use something else as a reference. And in my case, I'll use the countertop. And to do that, I've made this little doohickey. Somewhere right around here should be reasonably level. No doubt that's gonna stay put, and I've added an extra screw just for good measure. Let's do a quick test fit. Yep, good enough for something that'll most likely never see the light of day again. My measurements must have been a little bit off because I need to remove just a tiny bit of material right here. Much better. All I need to do now is to cut the hole for the hatch. Ta-da! Hole thusly cut. It looks like accessing the compartment down there won't be as awkward as I thought. See, that's pretty decent. I've gone ahead and screwed and glued the support for the lid in place, but before doing that, I traced the outline of the hole onto a piece of plywood. That'll make it much easier for me to cut the lid. I'll leave this to cure overnight, which is great because that means I can finally get back to what I was supposed to be doing today. Before I do the first test fit of the piece of stainless steel that'll go here, there's a bit of a lip I need to remove. Oh, that's the wrong one. This one should be a slightly better fit. I know this edge doesn't look very neat now, but it is going to get covered by some teak molding. Good morning, guys. Today is Sunday morning, and as always, that means I need to start rendering this video in about 3 or 4 hours. You might have noticed that my mic ran out of juice in that last clip, but I didn't notice until about an hour later. So let me just bring you up to speed. I finished sanding the surfaces in here, and as you might have noticed, I hooked up a vacuum to my sander. I wiped down the first sheet of stainless steel with some acetone just to get rid of any grease. Then I scoured the surface with some sandpaper and wiped it down with some more acetone. I was ready to adhere the first sheet of stainless steel in place. I snipped off the end of the adhesive I'll be using, and this is what came out. A congealed, globby mess. Obviously this stuff has turned bad. I only purchased it a few days ago and I don't see any kind of expiration date on it. This is what that adhesive looked like when it came out of the tube. See, it's all congealed and yucky looking. Fortunately, the hardware store opens in about 15 minutes, so I'll just head up there and see if I can get a replacement for this or maybe some different kind of adhesive. Ta-da! Same adhesive, different lot number. Let's give this another go. I've put down some paper just so that I don't accidentally get any adhesive on my sink. Yep, this is much better. No lumps. Using this adhesive, you've got a rather limited working time, but that's one of the properties I was looking for. But yeah, I'll just put up the first 3 sheets and we'll take a look. The first 3 sheets are adhered in place. They've still got their protective foil on, so they don't look great yet. I still have the last 2 to take care of, and that's where we're going to run into a little bit of a size issue. This is the bottom of the 2 pieces, and this is just a laminate that I've sanded rather than removing it. But as you can see over here, it doesn't fit anymore. And that was the if I mentioned in the very beginning of this video, the stuff about the measurements might being a little bit off, because I wasn't sure how to accurately compensate for the thickness of the stainless steel and also the adhesive. I only need to remove a tiny bit of material, and the most accurate way I've got of doing that is just by using this fence, a couple of clamps and my router. Perfect. I've followed the same procedure for the second piece, and that is also a reasonable fit. Using those 2 sheets of plywood and my angle grinder, I've just taken the 2 corresponding pieces of stainless steel down to size. Everything is in place. All that's left to do now is to remove the protective film. You might notice that these 2 panels here are held in place by screws. These screws right here, there are 4 of them on each panel. I know that isn't the neatest possible solution, but by doing that, it'll be super easy for me to remove the panels if I need to at some point in the future. Ta-da! I think that looks pretty dang awesome. Of course, you have to imagine it with all of the teak trim there and of course also the stove or oven in place. I am seriously running out of time. I had toyed with the idea of ending this video in a rather silly way by cutting the lid for that thing and then saying, why don't I end the video by putting a lid on, something like that. You know what, that's beneath all of us, so it's probably a good thing I ran out of time. But there are 2 things I want to mention. First thing I want to mention is that one of my friends has published a video with a different kind of labeling machine that can also write on heat shrink tube. I'll pop out one of those newfangled YouTube cards up here somewhere with a link for his video and also throw a link in the description. The second and final thing I wanted to mention is a bit of a teaser for the next video, because in that video I'll tell you an epic story of workplace harassment and pesky co-workers. Speaking of the next video, I might not publish a video next weekend because I might have some non-boating related stuff I need to deal with, but we'll see. Okay guys, that is gonna be it for this video. Remember to hit the like button if you've enjoyed this video, and yeah, I'll see you in a week or 2. See you!